Megan Fitzpatrick joins me now from Ottawa. Megan, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand will attend the UN conference. What can we expect to hear from her?
Well, Katie, she's been getting a lot of questions in recent days about Canada's position leading up to today's meetings, but also in the wake of France announcing last week that it intends to recognize Palestinian statehood in September at the upcoming United Nations General Assembly. So she was asked by reporters a couple of days ago about whether Canada will follow that decision by France. And she spoke to reporters while she was in Nunavik, mentioning that she'll be attending today's conference and that Canada will be leading a working group, but again asked if Canada intends to follow France's example. Here was part of her response.
We do support a two-state solution. However, we do need to see the return of all hostages. We need to ensure that Hamas lays down its arms and does not participate in any way in the governance of an eventual two-state solution. And so there are some steps that are necessary.
And Anand went on to talk about that statement that she and her counterparts from about 24 other countries recently released that called on Israel to reform how it is allowing the delivery of humanitarian aid. That statement calling the current situation dangerous. Israel rejecting that statement. Katie saying it fails to recognize the role that Hamas is playing in the situation and that Hamas is solely responsible for the suffering of both sides, Israel said. Now, we have also been hearing from Prime Minister Mark Carney in terms of Canada's position. Here's part of what he wrote on social media a few days ago. He wrote, "Canada supports a two-state solution which guarantees peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians. Canada will work intensively in all fora to further that end, including through the participation of the Minister of Foreign Affairs at the UN high-level conference on a two-state solution in New York." Carney also said in that statement that Canada condemns the Israeli government's failure to prevent the rapidly deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza. And the statement said that the denial of humanitarian aid is a violation of international law. So we will be watching for any further and fresh comments from the Prime Minister today, Katie, on that front. Meanwhile, Anand also talking about the phone calls that she's been having in recent days. We know she has spoken to her counterpart from Israel as well as the Palestinian Authority and her counterpart in Jordan. She has talked about how Canada has aid ready to deliver that's being pre-positioned in Jordan, and she's thanking Jordan for their assistance on that front. Now, we do know that Israel announced Sunday that it would ease some of the restrictions in order to increase the flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza. And Anita Anand posting on social media in reaction to that, saying it's a step in the right direction that will bring much needed relief to Palestinians. She said, however, we urge the Israeli government to allow this sustained and large-scale delivery of humanitarian aid and to make this humanitarian access permanent. So that's a bit of what we've heard from her, Katie, leading up to today's meeting. We'll be watching for any comments from her while she's in New York today.
The war between Israel and Hamas will be the focus of a summit at the United Nations today as ministers meet to discuss the possibility of a two-state solution. The conference is being hosted by France and Saudi Arabia. All 193 member nations have been invited. The United States and Israel are boycotting the conference. For more on this, I am joined by John Allen. He's a former Canadian ambassador to Israel and a senior fellow at the Bill Graham Centre for Contemporary International History. We've reached him in Toronto. Good morning, John. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to start by asking you, what are you watching for coming out of this summit?
I think the France, Saudi Arabia, and the others are hoping to work on a pathway towards a Palestinian state. What are the key issues that have to be undertaken in terms of governance, especially security, also the environment, sharing of resources? What are the kinds of issues that have to be dealt with as the world hopes to move towards the two-state solution that Canada and most other countries have been positioning for decades.
Now, with Israel and the U.S. both boycotting this conference, how does it change the trajectory of this meeting?
Well, that's a fundamental problem. The United States and Israel keep arguing that one needs a peace agreement between Israel and Palestine before recognition of a Palestinian state or a Palestinian state can come into being. And yet Israel, the Prime Minister, told Donald Trump 2 weeks ago that he's not interested in a Palestinian state. So you can't, on the one hand, argue that I don't want a Palestinian state and then say we won't discuss two states until there's a peace agreement. Both sides have to want peace. And certainly one side in this case has made clear that they're not interested in it. Not only the Prime Minister, but a number of his ministers have said the same thing. And in fact, their actions in trying to annex the West Bank and resettle Gaza demonstrate that they're not interested in two states.
Now, even with that as the backdrop for this meeting, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand will attend. What can we expect to hear from her from the Canadian perspective?
I think she'll reiterate Canada's long-standing position that two states for two peoples in this region is the only way to secure peace and stability for all peoples. There are 7.5 million Jews in the region. There are 7.5 million Arabs. And if they are to survive in peace and stability, two states is frankly the only solution. And she'll be, I think, working with other Western nations and other nations in general towards that end. 147 countries have already recognized Palestine as a state. France has indicated it will do so in September. And I imagine countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK will be discussing with France whether or not they should be joining in that recognition.
Is there anything that can come out of this summit from your perspective that can lead to any sort of tangible change or support for the people that are right now currently suffering and starving in Gaza?
I think the conference itself is a very positive move. I think it's an important event to reiterate the necessity of two states. Obviously, the people on the ground in Gaza, for them, the most important thing right now is to get food and humanitarian assistance and medical supplies and for a ceasefire. But in the bigger picture, to have a significant number of foreign ministers together reiterating the importance of their self-determination and of a two-state solution in the bigger picture is important.
Does the ongoing, it's certainly not a new crisis. This is something that has been going on at length in Gaza with the suffering and the humanitarian crisis. With that ongoing in this moment, does that add a sense of urgency to the political conversations here to find some sort of resolution or some sort of pathway towards something better?
I think it does. And I think in addition to talking about the longer term and the bigger picture, I'm sure that there will be calls for an immediate ceasefire, for a significant amount of aid to begin flowing. Some is flowing now, more is needed. And so there will be obviously attention to the crisis of the moment, as well as I said, to the longer term.
One other thing that we've seen over the course of the past week is the pressure from international aid organizations, different countries as well, bringing additional attention to what's been going on with the hunger crisis in Gaza. What kind of pressure that How has that pressure on Israel sort of forced Israel to make a change here?
I think that pressure has made a difference. The United States sending more money, more aid. The fact that Egypt and Jordan have been allowed to send in trucks for the first time, the fact that Israel is providing a safety corridor, and the fact that we have these 10-hour humanitarian ceasefires to allow that aid to get in. That's all as a result of international pressure and of the photos that we've seen of starving children. It's too little, it's too late, but it's good that it's happening now. And I think increased pressure will hopefully ensure that those lines of humanitarian assistance in bigger numbers continues.
John Allen, Canada's former ambassador to Israel, thank you for your time this morning.
Thanks very much.